All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here, we're doing a preview and a prediction for Week 5 game in the SEC, a mega showdown between Alabama and Georgia. Bulldogs, 2.5-point favorites, 52.5 the total, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time on ABC from Athens, Georgia. Getting things started, this Bama offense against that Georgia defense. This is an Alabama offense started the year off on a tough note in Tallahassee, but the last two games they've bounced back, beating up on a weak opponent, and then against Wisconsin, Ty Simpson was on a complete heater through the air, 24 of 29, nearly 400 yards, 4 touchdowns. Pinpoint accuracy was incredibly comfortable. Had all day to throw, but his accuracy and ball placement was sharp on a lot of those throws. It's like, at one point in that first half, man, this guy is not going to miss. Ty Simpson playing with great confidence going into the bye week. You hope that doesn't affect it one bit. This will be, his second road start on the year in a tough environment. He didn't look all that good back at week 1 in Florida State. Of course, it wasn't all his fault. For all accounts, on the stat sheet, looked solid, 254, 2 scores in that game. But Ty Simpson's been protecting the football, and that confidence seems to be growing by the week, Nick, because he was also 100% accurate against Louisiana Monroe. So he's playing his best football at the right time. And you're going up against a Georgia defense that got obliterated against Tennessee. In the offseason, we talked about how Georgia's corners were probably the biggest question mark on this team. And for the last couple of years, they have been. And they were straight up terrible against Tennessee, getting beat, losing a lot of 50-50 balls. It was quite embarrassing to see that happen to a Kirby Smart coach secondary. And the three guys that play are going to be the same ones out there. Daniel Harris, Dalen Everett, Ellis Robinson, the former 5-star recruit. He was the worst of the trio. It's going to be those three guys, Nick. So they've had a week as well to get things right. But it really didn't come down to scheme. It was just them getting straight up beat downfield. And that could certainly be a problem. Aguero, out of the slot, I thought he played a great game against Tennessee. Then KJ Bolden, he had some issues in coverage, but overall I think he's their best player in the back end. And then the other safety spots been split between Ja'Cory Thomas and Kyron Jones. The safety has been great against the run, great in tackling. But these corners, Nick, they're going to be facing one of the hottest receiving duos in the country. Ryan Williams finally recreated some of his magic against Wisconsin after a sluggish start to the year, and of course a terrible start to the end, a finish that is to the end of 2024. And then Gurmy Bernard, I think, is clearly the best player on this team. His production's off the charts. What do you think of this matchup? Alabama's hot. Georgia's coming off a sluggish effort. Both had a week off, though, so it's hard to anticipate we're going to see the same things we saw a couple weeks ago.
Well, if you want a reason why Alabama can win this game, it's because that matchup with the secondary massively favors them the way they're playing right now. This Alabama offense has seemed to hit its stride through these 3 games here, and certainly the last 2, where Ty Simpson looks to be dealing in the 2 weapons at wide receiver. Jeremy Bernard and Ryan Williams have been playing phenomenal. Obviously, Bernard, he hasn't skipped a beat at all. He's been the best player on this Alabama team, and probably, across the entire roster. They've just been so good. He's been dominant for them, 275 yards for him, 18.3 and 3 scores, just under 100 yards per game for him. He has been absolute lights out. He has been a great target. He's really been a guy that, Ty Simpson could sit there and throw to and really get a lot out of him. Ryan Williams, he had a sluggish start, did not look good at all in the Florida State game. Saw a lot of bad habits from him. He looked a lot better in the game against Wisconsin, 195 yards in the season, 19.5 yards to grab, 2 scores for him. If he can play like he did against Wisconsin, and obviously he had his huge breakout game last year against Georgia where he had that legendary spin move play for the touchdown, and he was really dominant all night against Georgia. If he can kind of channel some of that inner magic from last year, I think he can have a really strong day. There were still some issues in the Wisconsin game. He had a bad drop in the end zone late in garbage time. That was really a disappointing effort. He had another drop earlier in the game. It was a little bit dicey, so definitely want to keep an eye on that, whether or not he can keep his hands and be proper there. As for Ty Simpson, I have been blown away with him as of late. He has been absolutely phenomenal these last 2 games. 72% comp rate on the year, 862 yards and 9 touchdowns for the quarterback, who looks confident and looks like he's hitting his stride. If you can give him protection there, if he's comfortable and confident in the pocket and has time, he will pick you apart all day. I think there's a big chance that could potentially happen here. I like this matchup advantage. 17 of 17 against Louisiana Monroe, 24 of 29 against Wisconsin, 7 touchdowns across those 2 games. He has been very accurate. He is very confident, and I think that's a really good thing to see overall. This offense, 42.7 points per game so far this season, and just over 1,000 passing yards on the year, mostly for Ty Simpson. Some of that's coming from some other guys on the roster as well. I think this Georgia secondary, they got beat up, right? They had a bad game against a Tennessee team, an uncharacteristic bad game from a Georgia secondary. I don't know if these guys aren't progressing exactly how they would hope. You want to see more out of the corner pieces. You highlighted those guys there. Everett, Daniel Harris. These guys are not having phenomenal seasons. They certainly just got beat over and over again. And if they get beat like they did against Tennessee, I think Alabama wins this game and has a really good showing there. I think these are solid pieces in the secondary for Georgia, but they're just not playing to their high level. Can they get right off the bye week? That's a massive matchup that I'm highlighting. I think it's the biggest key for this game.
Even in two high zone, Georgia was still giving up some lapses in coverage, so that's been a big focal point. Really 2 weeks to get ready for this passing attack, so I expect a lot of that to be fixed, but I definitely think these Georgia corners are only so good, and Bama will certainly have some success through the air. Biggest problem for the Tide is this rushing attack. It's really not good. They had one solid drive against FSU to start the year, and that was on the first possession, right? Running the football. Rest of the game, nothing. They bounced back against ULM. Who cares? Against Wisconsin, they had nothing. Ty Simpson ended up being the leading rusher, Nick, 25 yards. 19 of that came on a sack. It was supposed to be a sack. 3 guys ran into each other. He was able to showcase some elusiveness and ran away. Without that, though, this rushing offense, it's abysmal, and it's been abysmal. Last year it was terrible. Jalen Miller really carried the rushing production, especially in the game against Georgia last year. Like you said, Jam Miller coming back, that's potentially good. He's a guy that has some explosiveness, at least in the receiving game, but last year in conference play, 3.6 yards per attempt. They can't generate nothing. I don't care if Jam Miller's back or not. I think his dual threat ability certainly is helpful, and he can certainly be powerful in the hole. But in terms of upping rushing production, doubling it or at least tripling it, I don't think that's going to happen just because Jam is back. This offensive line, I think, is really good for Alabama, at least on paper. When it comes to size and height, these guys really check the boxes. Cam Dewberry's been a nice addition at left guard. Parker Brailsford's having a much better year in pass pro at center. Gino Van Demark has been really solid at right guard as well. They're hoping Jaden Roberts, though, can be back and healthy fully for this game. The tackles are pretty, inconsistent. I know Caden Proctor is supposed to be this bookend, but he just does not always bring it. His pass protection this year has been very iffy. And then right tackle Wilkin Formby, Nick will tell you himself, is not very good at football. So the tackles are not great. And for Georgia, their pass rush, I don't know if they're going to be exactly able to exploit it. Their defensive line is also loaded with, nasty guys in terms of talent and size. Gabe Harris, Christian Miller, Quintavious Johnson, Jordan Hall, a freshman Elijah Griffin, and then a big body in Xavier McLeod. I mean, they're deep, right? Especially on the interior, but the pass rushing has also been less than desirable for the Bulldogs. So this is an interesting matchup, Nick, because I don't expect Bama to run the ball all that well, but if they can run the ball in the red zone in those 3rd and 4th and shorts, that's going to give them an edge. Maybe that's all they need to do to win this game. But when it comes to that pass rush against these tackles, who do you think that favors?
Yeah, you're right. Getting Jam Miller back isn't going to double or triple Alabama's production on the ground, but it helps, and seeing him back is certainly a big positivity thing. If you're an Alabama fan, I think it's a really good thing to see Jam Miller back because this rushing attack just has not been good enough so far this season. 4.26 yards per attempt, 4 scores on the season. Obviously, a lot of that is outweighed by their big performance against ULM. Kevin Riley, he looked good in his limited touches, 120 yards for him. A.K. Deere, he has 85 yards and a touchdown. Certainly, they want to see if he can be involved in this offense. Ty Simpson, he's got a couple of yards here and there on the ground. He had that 25-yard scamper, like you said there, so he can certainly be mobile when necessary. We saw a little bit of that in the Florida State game as well. So, certainly keeping an eye on what that looks like here. I don't think Alabama is going to dominate on the ground. I think certainly the playbook here is to try and win this battle against that secondary that is shown to be a little bit weak this year. I think the interior has been absolutely phenomenal. Van Denmark, Brailsford, and Dewberry have been incredible. I am super happy with what they have done at the 2 guard positions and the center position, but the tackles are an issue. Wilkin Formby, I don't even really want to talk about him because he is just an absolute walking disaster. I'm sure he's going to get 2.5, 3 false starts there. If the line's at 2.5 false starts, bet the over on Wilkin Formby. I think he'll certainly jump multiple times and just be a complete disaster on that right side. As for Caden Proctor, we saw some flashes so far this season of him developing into a strong product at left tackle, but overall it still seems to be the jury is still out. He still has lapses in judgment. He still makes mistakes, and he still is sometimes a bit iffy on that left side. So certainly if Georgia wants to win this battle, I think they have to attack the 2 tackles very strongly, which is something you've seen in the past from Georgia teams. Obviously, this is a deep defensive line, even if it doesn't have the top names and top guys that you expect out of a previous Georgia program. I look at Elijah Griffin, the true freshman, 6 total tackles for him, a tackle for loss. I've been pretty impressed with his production as a younger guy early on. It's not often you see that. Jordan Hall, 5 total tackles for him as well, and a tackle for loss. So another guy that's been productive. Jordan Thomas, 2 tackles for him and a tackle for loss. The linebackers C.J. Allen and Raylan Wilson have been both very dominant so far. Wilson, 23 total tackles 3 TFLs, a sack. CJ Allen, 22 total tackles, 2 TFLs, and a sack. How much pressure can they get on this Alabama offense? How much pressure they can get in general on Ty Simpson, I think will be a big question mark. And can this rushing attack even have remotely a pulse? If they can find a way to get some yardage on the ground and find a way to have anything better than what they had against Wisconsin, that could go a really long way and will certainly guide Alabama to a win.
Yeah, I think you certainly want to pay attention to the variety of blitzes Georgia's going to bring, especially from the nickel. They do it randomly all the time, and it can lead to strip sacks or big losses, so it'll be a very interesting matchup on that side of the ball. Moving to the other side of things, the Georgia offense now, and that Crimson Tide defense. For Georgia, this is an offense that had 2 weak opponents to tune up for Tennessee, and they ended up winning what should not have been a shootout, but it was, and Georgia matched them stride for stride, especially in that second half. Gunnar Stockton, he manned up real fast. This is a team that was trailing by multiple scores a lot in that first frame. 304 yards, 2 touchdowns, 74%. They were 8 of 17 on third down. Most of that was on his arm. Of course, he had that amazing touchdown on fourth down to London Humphreys and the 2-point conversion right after it. He was on fire. He's playing some really good football. He was able to protect the ball as well. This is a guy that showcased, nice improvements when it comes to his mobility, elusiveness inside the pocket. He's certainly a live runner as well. He's showcased that a bit now this year. He had a rushing touchdown against UT, and then he had a couple against Marshall, where he's not bad at running the football. He's a pretty live runner. Sometimes he gets a little antsy with his feet, and I thought you'd see that while trailing against Tennessee. But no, Nick, he stood in the pocket. He was delivering good throws to everybody. Humphreys, of course, has 2 scores this year. Colby Young is really the top target, 13 grabs for $179. And then Zachariah Branch, he's great in short yardage, and he's phenomenal on those screens. That touchdown he had against Tennessee was a perfect call by Mike Bobo, a screen against the blitz. I think it was on a third down, too, and he ended up house calling that one with absolute ease. So there's a lot of weapons here from Georgia, especially at tight end, Lawson Lucky and Oscar Delp. They're not going to wow you on the stat sheet. These guys are nice and physical, big bodies who can make incredible catches downfield as well. And I think Noah Thomas, he's a physical guy who will eventually get involved, especially in the red zone. So Georgia has plenty of weapons, and Stockton did a good job of dishing it out across the field. For Georgia, their rushing attack, it's not like it's wildly better than Bama's. It certainly is, but not by that wide of a margin. Last year, they really struggled to find production, especially in conference play. In this contest a year ago, 80 yards on almost 30 attempts. Against Tennessee, they had about 200 yards. That was on 55 attempts, so they weren't all that efficient, but they did enough to stay ahead of the sticks. Nate Frazier, Dwight Phillips, Chauncey Bowens, they all played. I don't think this backfield is all that electrifying, but it is a handful of different guys. And you also have Josh McCray, who gets involved in short yardage. So for Georgia, they have plenty of key components here. It's a pretty healthy room altogether. But at times, Nick, they got way too complacent, I thought, and that led to them, wasting opportunity against Tennessee running the football. And we've seen Alabama struggle at times against the run, over the last 12 months. Not as much when the other team doesn't have a great running quarterback, but at times we've seen them get gashed down the middle with physicality. And I think Georgia's going to look to bring it to them in that regard. The Bama defensive line still is incredibly loaded, though. They have so much talent. We want to see that, paper translate to the field. LT Overton is your clear standout. He's very consistent, especially as a pass rusher. Q Rasaw, Yanze Pierre, James Smith. These guys, I want to see them continue to be stout. It's a deep group for Alabama as well. Edric Hill, Kelby Collins, a few others, Nick. Who do you think this favors here? Because the Georgia rushing attack, at any moment it can explode, and I think they're certainly going to bring the physicality. Is Alabama ready to slow down this Georgia rushing attack here on the road?
I think Georgia fans are a little hard on their offense. I think this offense has been good. You've seen some talk on social media how Georgia fans have not been pleased with the way the offense so far looking. And I don't really know if that's a fair assessment. I think this offense has been solid, and they've done their job. They won a shootout. They scored 44 points against a Tennessee defense that a lot of people think is a pretty good unit. So I'm not upset at all. Yeah, they were a little wonky against Austin Peay and not the best against Marshall, but I think when you play the big-time opponents, if you can score 44 points against a top team in the SEC, any day of the week, you're going to take that if you're a Georgia fan. I think Gunnar Stockton is doing enough at quarterback. He's looking good so far. 71% comp rate, 721 yards passing, 4 touchdowns. Good enough, right? There's nothing wrong with that. Those are above-average stats and pretty solid for a younger quarterback who's making his first career starts. I think that's pretty solid. In terms of wideouts, Colby Young and Zachariah Branch have really led the way. Both of them have double-digit grabs, 180 yards plus for the two of them. 2 touchdowns for Branch. He's been really involved. Humphreys has been involved in the screenplay game. He's got 2 touchdowns. He's certainly a red zone threat, but they have the 5 passing touchdowns, 2 of them to Branch, 2 of them to Humphreys, only 1 to Aeneas Williams, the tight end. So they don't really have a whole lot of passing touchdowns. They've been trying to use the offense on the ground in the red zone, which I think is something they will certainly try to do in this matchup. Gunnar Stockton, 3 rushing touchdowns. Chauncey Bowers, Nate Frazier, Dwight Phillips. These guys all have rushing touchdowns. Expect them to try and run the ball in the red zone. That's a really conservative play calling option from Kirby Smart's offense, or Mike Bobo's offense, I should say, as they try to run the ball in the red zone. That's going to be the key success here. So if Alabama wants to win this game, they got to be strong in the red zone against the run. I think that's the biggest opportunity for Georgia to have a big day, is trying to break off some runs, put themselves in good position. I think Stockton has shown to be a decently mobile quarterback. Obviously, that's not in the game plan, but Georgia does their homework, and they know that Alabama is weak against running quarterbacks, so maybe they will try to factor that into a game plan that they previously would not factor into it. 39 points per game so far, 4.51 yards per attempt, and 10 scores on the ground, while the 5 passing touchdowns to 1 pick on the season. The pick was thrown by a backup. As for the Alabama defensive line, this is a unit that I'm interested to see what they look like in this matchup. They were struggling to get pressure on the quarterback in the first 2 games. They didn't have a sack in the first 2 games, although they came out and had a really strong performance against Wisconsin, producing 4 sacks. And that one looking really good. Yanze Pierre, I think he's been really solid as a versatile asset, certainly as a good pass rushing asset. 7 total tackles, 3 TFLs, 1 sack for him. London Simmons has been solid. 6 total tackles for him, 1 sack. He has looked pretty solid so far. LT Overton, he seemed to step up and was really strong in that game against Wisconsin. 8 total tackles, 3 TFLs, and a sack for him. Can this Bama, a defensive line, find a way to get pressure on this Georgia offense? If they can do so, they can make Stockton uncomfortable, really put him in situations where they have to attack him, question his decision making, force him into quick throws, force him into quick decisions. That could certainly go a long way. I think the pressure could certainly be there for Alabama, and that may be a big key.
Yeah, I definitely think the Georgia offensive tackle is still a bit of a weakness for him. Monroe Freeling at left, and then Bo Hughley at right tackle. The interior is pretty stout. Right guard's really been an inconsistent position for him. They're really struggling to figure out who's going to be the mainstay there. Center Drew Bobo's been elite, and then Michael Morris, the left guard's nice and physical, and he got out there on that run in overtime to set up the game winner. So for the Georgia offensive line, I think they have a lot of size and they have a nice edge because the Alabama pass rush, he came alive against Wisconsin, but still too much inconsistency outside of LT Overton. The linebackers I want to see be more consistent from Bama as well. These guys are great. Justin Jefferson, Deontay Lawson, a lot of missed tackles though. Again, inconsistencies versus the run. Lawson's not been that good in coverage either. You look at the secondary for Bama, this is a group that's incredibly talented. Bray Hubbard bounced back after a poor effort week 1. A guy who I think is tremendous, and he was great against Wisconsin. Hard hits, a couple of interceptions, did a little bit of everything there. Deshaun Jones has been the main guy in the slot. He's also missed a handful of tackles this year. At corner, it's a respectable group. Xavier Brown, though, he's gotten beat a few times. And then Damani Jackson, despite not giving up a reception yet, I don't think this guy's all that great. I think that he could certainly struggle, especially against his former Trojan teammate in Zachariah Branch. That'll be a fun matchup out there. The corners are respectable. I don't think they're all that good. I think they're probably better than Georgia's. At least that's how they've played this year. But one thing that happened against Florida State is they were running it all over them, and they would just throw it behind their head, and now we're not going to have that same style of offense they're playing, so that should allow this secondary to bow up a little bit. But I think altogether, we're looking at more weaknesses and more criticisms for both of these teams than we have positives, Nick, and that's why this one's so interesting to break down.
Yeah, it certainly is interesting to break down. I look at the linebackers. They got to do more for Alabama. I think they've been solid, and I've certainly seen a lot more over the last 2 weeks, but I need to see more of these guys. Deontay Lawson, he's got to clean up his tackles. He leads the team with 19 tackles, but he has some missed tackles, 1 TFL for him. Justin Jefferson, 13 total tackles, a TFL, and a pick for him. He's got a pass breakup as well. He's been pretty solid in coverage. Nikai Hill-Green, 11 total tackles for him. He has been solid for this team. I think Keon Sabb has been good in the secondary, 11 total tackles. Bray Hubbard, he bounced back from what was an abysmal showing in Tallahassee to really look good the last 2 weeks. 13 total tackles, a TFL, 2 picks for him. He's really showing himself to be one of the better pieces in the secondary. I think he continued to develop throughout the season. And I think Damani Jackson, he's been good, although, he hasn't really been tested too much. So can he win that battle? Like you said, that's an intriguing matchup for him. He's got 7 total tackles. I think this is a secondary that's, finding their form. 15 points per game given up so far for this Alabama defense, 4.51 yards per play. They have 3 interceptions, only 1 passing touchdown given up. So I think the recipe clearly is if you want to beat Alabama, it's going to have to be on the ground. Can they survive against a Georgia rushing attack that's got a bunch of different faces here? That's the key matchup. I think the 2 key matchups from each side in terms of pairing is, can the Alabama offense attack this Georgia secondary and make them pay? Can the Georgia rushing attack this defensive line and make them pay? Those are the 2 big key things I'm watching in terms of the 2 key battles.
Now I move to the final thoughts on the prediction. When I talked about the Georgia defense, I actually forgot to talk about their linebackers, got a little distracted there, but I think it's fine for the closing monologue, as this is an elite group, the best one in the country, and that could certainly be the biggest difference maker with their athletic ability and their versatility. Raylan Wilson and CJ Allen have been purely flawless this year. Chris Cole and Justin Williams, when they get on the field as the 2s in rotation, they're just as good. You look at both of these teams, right? And Bama started the year on a tough note. Georgia, they're able to survive on a little bit of luck and some hard playmaking against Tennessee. And so now they sit undefeated. In Alabama, with how their pass game looked last time out compared to how the secondary looked, you think that they would give, that's the big advantage, right? And I think that's why you're seeing this line be so close, and that's why people are thinking Alabama can win, right? I remember last year heading into the Texas game, Georgia was sluggish. They dragged their feet into that one, and we said there's no way Texas loses in Austin, right? Georgia put on one of the nastiest showings I've seen from a defense in a long time. They were deadly scary that night, winning all across the field, and it was embarrassing for Texas. Now Georgia's at home, a week off. Kirby Smart, I'm sure, has gotten in that back, Nick, of these defensive backs. They're going to play a lot better. And if Alabama can't throw the football, what do we have? I keep saying it. Jalen Milroe's not here. We're not going to run the football. We can't do it against Wisconsin or whoever else. We're not going to do it against Georgia. It's not going to happen. We're going to be one-dimensional. That's a given. Georgia, they could be forced to be one-dimensional as well, but their rushing attack is going to be a little bit more consistent, I would think, across 4 quarters. And their play calling for Mike Bobo is tremendous. And I think Stockton's going to be put in favorable situations. You're going to see his legs involved as well. I think the secondary is going to have a sharp game. And I see them beating Alabama by 2 touchdowns at home. And I do have that inside joke that I've always said to people, Nick, over the last couple of years, that Alabama will never lose to Georgia. So I'm not going to be mad if the Crimson Tide lose because I like to pick at Georgia fans. But in this contest on Saturday, the Bulldogs are going to stay undefeated.
I think Alabama's in a great position here when you look at this matchup, this rivalry of sorts. These two programs do not like each other. Since 2007, Alabama's 8-2 in those games. They beat them in Tuscaloosa, they beat them in Athens, they beat them in Atlanta. Really, the only place they have not beaten them in recent times is in Indianapolis. Outside of that, they have won over and over again in different locations. And I know the man that was coaching most of those games is going to be sitting in the game day booth in Happy Valley. But I think Kalen DeBoer showed last year, because he's the man that was coaching in that win last year, that he can certainly coach and he can outsmart Kirby Smart. Yes, that game was an absolute instant classic, and Alabama did almost blow it. That is an important thing to note, but I think Alabama's in a good spot here. I think Ty Simpson's really looking confident under center. If you give him time in the pocket to attack this secondary, I think you'll have a big day. I think if Alabama wants to win this game, they're going to have to do something similar to last year, where they just go out and absolutely blitz Georgia early on, take advantage of those mishaps. If they get the ball first, they got to go out and attack deep and try to put pressure on that secondary. Don't play timid on the road. I think you have to go out and absolutely blitz them full on and try to dial up as much as you can. I think they really need to go for the throat, attack early on. Do not play timid in a tough road environment. Very tough to play in Athens. It's no joke, certainly. But last time there was a big marquee matchup in Athens in 2015, Alabama won that one. The time before that as well, 2008, Alabama won that one. So I think Alabama's in a really good position here. I think Georgia's a phenomenal team, right? There's no issue there. I think both these teams will be playing in the playoffs come December. I like Alabama to really put up a good fight here. No pick from me as an Alabama alum. I think this is a great matchup, obviously a very marquee matchup. I think Ty Simpson has the stuff to get the job done. I think the defense has the stuff. It will be a shootout. There'll be a ton of points. There is certainly no doubt in my mind there will be a lot of points in this matchup Saturday night. Going to be a absolute high-scoring affair again. I think if Alabama wants to win, they have to come out, click, and attack early on. If Georgia wants to win, they have to set the tempo early, run the ball a lot, slow the game down, and put themselves in a position where they can dominate on the ground. A great matchup. These are the two top teams in the SEC, as always. A phenomenal game going down in prime time. Type of game you don't want to miss for anything in the world. I'm really excited for this matchup. I cannot wait to see what happens.
I also think Georgia, they're going to be incredibly creative with their blitzes as well, a little bit more creative than Alabama, and they'll be able to create some negative plays that's going to put them in some favorable situations. Alabama, though, I think they can do well in third and long with this pass game, so it really is a fun match of chess and checkers. Like you said, it's going to be potentially another all-time classic going down in Athens. That's me for today's episode. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.